All right. Any other questions? Wow. Okay. So what the next step is that we as a board will start with our discussions and stuff and kind of deliberate here, right, in front of everybody. Yay. No, I just teasing. I appreciate all the comments and the questions and all the written material again, because it really does help us look at this. We have a very important job before us. The first thing I'd like to do is we need to take a vote on this 8 questions. I personally, the first 7 questions, as of last meeting, we were throwing those out because they really weren't appropriate, and that leaves us with one question, which is the question number 8 in the declaratory order, stating is dry needling within the scope of practice of physical therapy. Now, we have to decide if we have to answer the declaratory order. The declaratory order, when a practitioner does this, the practitioner, which would be the Acupuncture Society since they presented it, should demonstrate that they will be aggrieved or adversely affected if we do not issue an order. I am not sure that we have demonstrated that they will be aggrieved or adversely affected if we do not answer their declaratory order, and it is up to us as a board that we do not have to answer that, and we can discuss that. However, I do believe a lot of good information, questions, and a lot of time has been spent on this, and I think it is right that we answer that number 8 question. So do I have a vote, or do you want to discuss about the declaratory order? And I would like a motion to go ahead and either respond to question number 8 and do not respond to question 1 through 7, or do not answer the declaratory order.
I move that we answer question 8 and do not answer questions 1 through 7.
Okay, Erin has that.
I would second.
And Melinda seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? All right, now our job becomes that we need to look at question number 8. Is dry needling within the scope of practice of physical therapy? I think the first thing, and just as both of the associations brought up, is we really need to look at the definition. What is the definition of dry needling? Now we, and that was brought up too, are not here to define the definition of acupuncture. Only the medical board can define the definition of acupuncture. According to the codes, there is a definition of acupuncture, 148E.1. In Iowa, there is no definition of dry needling within the codes. So we, as a board, can kind of formulate and decide our definition of dry needling. What do you consider dry needling? So let's start there and start with kind of discussion of that, of how we would want to even define it based on the presentations of the 2.
Can I start?
You bet.
All right. I think, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel here, because I think the Federation State PT Board has already established a strong definition. I'd like to look at that and then tweak it. And if we have it, it's, I don't know if you guys have that study, but there was this, I don't know.
I don't think I have it.
Do you want to read?
I can read
the definition?
I can read the definitions that was established here.
Okay.
This is the executive summary. Dry needling is a skilled technique performed by a physical therapist using filiform needles to penetrate the skin and/or underlying tissue to effect change in body structures and functions for the evaluation and management of neuromusculoskeletal conditions, pain, movement impairments, and disability.
Okay, so let's break down that definition and have any discussion over it. Number 1, the use of a filiform needle. Do we agree that that is what dry needling is? It is the use of a filiform needle?
Well, can I
Go ahead.
Can I back up just a little
You
bit?
bet.
Because I think we need clarification right before that. Dry needling is a skilled technique.
Okay, there you go.
Because I think that's important. I think it's an important statement. I think it's a technique, but it's also a procedure. It's a procedure that is performed within the expertise that a physical therapist is trained. So therefore, I think if I were to scope, to put this frame, I would say that dry needling is a skilled procedure performed by a physical therapist, and then we can go into using filiform needles.
Tell me why you like the word procedure rather than treatment or technique again.
I think probably because of our licensure states, especially within our scope of practice, that we're looking at physical therapy use as effective properties of physical agents. We use therapeutic exercise, and we use rehabilitative procedure. And I think that falls.
That definition, because we do use the word procedure throughout our scope of practice, right, under rehabilitation procedure, which I think this kind of falls under. Okay, so dry needling is a skilled procedure performed by a PT. What's the second component?
Using filiform needles to penetrate the skin and/or underlying tissues.
Okay, so filiform needles to penetrate the skin and underlying tissues. Do we want to define the tissues? Are they neuromuscular, connective, or do we just continue with the general term underlying? How much definition based on what they're doing?
Well, do we want to define the needle
Oh, filiform needle.
as like a single filiform needle, a single solid filiform needle, being specific with what the type of filiform needle is?
I definitely think you need to state a solid filiform needle. I think that's probably, I don't know.
Using
What other
multiple
kind
I don't even
needles?
know if there's non-solid ones,
What
but.
kind of solid filiform
Is
needles
it-
are there?
I mean, do we use multiple needles? Do we use one single needle?
It's supposed to be
I
one
think it
needle
kind of
per
depends on, as they both stated, it depends on the area of the,
But you can still only use one needle per point. Isn't that the sanitary, sterile?
yeah, you would only use one needle per point. You're not taking out the needle and then putting it into another area. So it's one
Single use.
Single use needle? Like the box.
So.
I don't know if we would have to even define single.
So you're adding to the scope of practice as the acupuncturists sit here? Is that what you're doing
We're
here?
defining if
Defining
this
the-
falls within the
We're
scope.
defining what dry needling is based on somebody.
It's board discussion, so Laura,
It's a
Yeah, I
charade,
think-
is what it is.
I think in order to
can't
answer
stand
the
it.
question of if dry needling is within the scope, we have to be working with the definition. Otherwise, it means a different thing to every person. So I think that's what the board is trying to do, is come up with their definition so that then they can answer the question that's been proposed. And I think maybe what they're trying to ask, Shane, maybe you can answer this. Is there ever more than one needle in the body at a time when you do dry needling? Or is it, like you said, usually one, sometimes two or three. Do you take them out before you put, I think that's maybe where we're going.
I do not. I mean, I have one needle in hand at a time,
One needle in hand. And then,
dispose of it. Another new needle, another spot.
so you don't ever put a needle in,
Leave
release it, grab another one and put it in?
I do not.
Okay, so you're working with
But
one.
having said that, I don't know.
That's why the Practice Act itself is recommended.
I agree. I think we have to be really careful making
Yeah.
it too specific.
Yeah,
I'd be, yeah.
Because we don't, I don't know, I just don't.
Basically,
I feel like-
they're utilizing a filiform needle.
And I feel like SB.
I don't know if we need to.
FSB too. I feel like they did a lot of research behind their definition, I would think. I don't feel like we
So
need
maybe
to-
not to reinvent the wheel at all and leave it as the definition.
Read the
they have.
definition to me one more time.
Dry needling is a skilled technique performed by a physical therapist using filiform needles to penetrate the skin and/or underlying tissues to effect change in body structures and functions for the evaluation and management of neuromusculoskeletal conditions, pain, movement impairments, and disability.
And just to clarify, this is just for purposes of this order, so.
Yeah, this isn't what we're putting in any of our
Yeah,
stuff.
okay.
It's just as we think
So we know what
through.
we're all talking about.
Right.
I'm okay with that definition for this discussion.
Well, then
Yeah, I
it's a
agree.
standardized definition, which I think is important to utilize in making the decision.
By higher board. I
Okay,
think so too.
so utilizing that definition,
Regular technique rather than procedure.
is it within a physical therapy scope of practice? Now, when we look at the scope of practice, and I think it was brought up, one of the things that is in our scope of practice is utilizing rehabilitation procedures. And so I think this is kind of where that falls, that we do a rehabilitation procedure, and dry needling could be a rehabilitation procedure. When you guys read our scope, where else do you think it might fall or not fall? I mean, it may not fall.
When I read it, I look at two, when we're talking about the properties of physical agents, it says including but not limited to. And I think that those are important words.
Okay.
We're listing these things, but we're not saying
It's all inclusive.
it's all, yeah, that every single thing is on here. To me,
Well,
that's
I
when
mean,
read
you
that.
think about in 2000, you know, like you said, 2005, EMGs became, and we
Right.
utilized the EMG as a tool or needle there, wound debridement, we use a tool there. All of those type of things are within, our tools that we use.
And they're tools, they're
It's
used
not the
for
primary
within the
source of the,
content.
it's not the, yeah.
And we're using them to correct and minimize impairment, which is in the Iowa code. So we do utilize different tools.
I also go back to, you know, we apply E-stim, we apply iontophoresis, we apply ultrasound, all of those things penetrate deeper than the skin level. We are penetrating below the surface in a number of our modalities to affect these, to alleviate physical impairment. I mean, personally, I don't think this is different.
Okay?
We're introducing things to the body. Iontophoresis has a systemic effect.
Yeah.
You know, we introduce that to the body. It definitely penetrates. Ultrasound does as well.
And we've been doing dry needling. Physical therapists in the state of Iowa have been doing dry needling for
We don't know.
at least we don't know when they all started it, because we've never not had dry needling within our practice act. They've all been able to do it, or within the licensure board. We know in 2010, the board came out with an informal decision that it was within the scope. And we have had no complaints on it. Okay, let's take it one step further. As Mr. Terrell mentioned, training. You said that if they had the right training, it could be within the scope. Now, training, to me, is not, we would have to design, from a board perspective, we would have to design rules on training, and I think we would need to have a subcommittee to look at the training of what this would be within, and then decide if we want to place it in the rules. Any of our other physical therapy or occupational therapy, we have no other hours. So for example, if we put in hours of training, nowhere else in our practice do we do that for any other modality, any other, we just say they have to be competent.
What is the EMG requirement? Because I know there's a special requirement for training for that.
I would have, I mean, I think it,
That would
we
be the
did not
consideration,
define
I
it
think.
in our rules. It might have been defined in that white paper that was out there. And again, it's probably competent. Is how-
Do you think it had hours in
I
it?
believe it has hours.
Okay,
It's more
Okay.
specific than that.
But
So
that's
that
not
would
in
be
our code.
but that's
something-
not in our code.
No, it's not in
Right.
the code for consideration
Right,
today,
so-
but if we would
so
go
if
down
we did a
that
white-
path
But
with
we looked at training.
of the training side of it, we would want to be consistent in, or at least consider how we're doing that. And
My only fear
and maybe
of that
look
is
into why
then we're gonna have to
that
start
was done.
doing everything.
That's
Ultrasound,
fine.
you have to have this many hours, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm looking at treatments received in the
I
past. I've had
I
as
think
much
we
bruising
should-
from a Graston
Yeah. Graston
Graston
technique.
technique, thank you, as probably anybody's ever had any type of healing. So,
I do think that they have brought up a good point about the training. I think it is worth our board to design a subcommittee to look at hours,
Especially
whether
since
we,
that's
and we
been
can
the
decide that we
public
want
comment
or not, but I would think it's definitely something that to be discussed. Here today, we are to answer the number one question. Is dry needling within the scope of practice of physical therapy? Any further discussion? Do I have a motion to answer that question?
Just to answer it? I move
No.
that we answer the question.
Well, how would you like to answer it?
Okay.
We have to answer yes or no. So,
Do we want a motion to answer the question? Or,
we already voted to
Okay.
answer the question, so
And it-
now is,
Now,
We
you
just have
can
to
either make a
decide.
motion, or if you want to discuss more before there's a motion, that's fine too, but.
Well, I think my only other thing I would just point out, and it's not necessarily a part of the question, but it kind of is, because it's part of our concern, and that is the public safety issue.
oh, yeah.
And to me, I understand that there's public concern anytime somebody is doing something new. I understand that, I completely do. Part of it though, to me, is that there have not been any complaints. There's been no public complaint to us about this. And granted, there aren't that many people doing it, and as that increases, perhaps that will increase, but percentage-wise, you would expect that, right? Just like anything. So the more people who are doing Pilates training in their clinic, there's gonna be people who are gonna have adverse effects occasionally. That always happens. So I personally don't have a public safety concern.
I think you deal with public safety like we deal with every other procedure that somebody, I mean, there might be, you know, a bad physical therapist out there.
For sure.
And that we deal with that according to our disciplinary rules, no matter what technique they're using, I don't care what they are
Right.
using. We,
I would say there's a pneumothorax that occurs.
yeah,
then
then we
discipline
deal
that
with those
person.
type of things.
I think the consequences of other modalities are far riskier if you're using e-stim with someone who has a pacemaker. If you're not following the protocols
Sure,
required that
we
you're
bet,
trained,
we definitely have to talk about it.
there are some far greater risks in other modalities that PTs already use that outweigh these concerns, in my opinion.
And we all know that we don't, because we don't have to concern ourselves with business practices. I mean, you know, if we're taking business away from somebody
And
else, that's not
the
our-
marketing component, we have had other complaints to this board that a personal trainer puts himself out as a physical therapist, and so then we deal with that. If we have a physical therapist that puts himself out as an acupuncturist and a marketing component,
Yeah, and they actually.
we
Then we
really deal and discipline with that too. So, you know, we've gone down those roads before too. Other thoughts or questions?
So are we gonna deal with the issue of the legality of the needle purchasing? Is that separate or is that even
No,
our
it's
thing?
not.
I don't think that's part of our.
That's not part of our issue. I make a motion that dry needling is within the scope of practice or scope of service of physical therapy.
A second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? All right, so our, the board's declaratory order answer is that dry needling does fall within the scope of practice of physical therapy.
And Denise, just to let you know, the board does have to issue a written decision.
We will, yep.
That'll be drafted by staff, and then you'll actually approve that order yourself, and so that'll be formally issued once that's done, and hopefully hopefully by the end of the year, but, you know, maybe within 30 days would be a good goal to have,
With all,
with the,
with all of our reasonings and.
yeah.
Could I have who made the second again, please?
Me.
Thank you, Karen. All
And then
right.
Denise, you talked about a
Yes.
committee.
Yes,
Do you wanna-
let's go ahead and form a committee to look at the training. I think that's a good idea. So who would like to be on that committee?
I would be interested.
Okay, so we
I
have
would.
Rachel and Todd and Aaron. Okay, so those three will get together, start looking at training hours, various things like that, and if we need to look at our rules and regs for that kind of stuff. All right?
Report by March, or, I mean, you want us to?
Good, we need to big timelines.
We need
Sure.
timelines. I need a deadline.
I mean, I would say at least, whatever you come back with, if you're still researching in March, just give us an update where you're at, and then that will be good. Do we need to look at dry needling going into any rules and regs, the definition or anything like that at this point?
I mean, certainly right now, your administrative rules, you know, the different categories of physical therapy that you're allowed to do are kind of listed in there, and there is a specific rule regarding examples of rehabilitative procedures.
Yeah.
And so it sounded like that's kind of what you were saying, it fits best under, and so you could, and it probably would be encouraged actually to make it clear for people who weren't here or haven't been paying attention, if you would do initiate a rulemaking to add that maybe as a bullet point, and so, I don't know, again, we probably want to have some kind of definition that's incorporated, and so, perhaps for the March agenda, we can, I think March minutes meeting, come up with some, you know, starting point, and then you can decide,
Decide if we want to notice the rules.
yeah, what you want to do with a rule that would just kind of codify your decision here.
Because I think we need to talk about, I guess I think we need a lot of discussion about where that would go then. So if we're really gonna spell it out like that, I'm not sure I agree that's where it goes. I don't know. I mean, I would just need to think about it, so.
We've already placed it, just
Yes.
debated that?
Yeah.
No problem. All right, thank you for coming. We are going to, as a board, now move into closed session. So we will be closing out the